Hey there, I'm Mike. I'm 24, and man, do I have a story to tell you? It's about this girl, Katrin. She's 22, drop-dead gorgeous, and completely unpredictable. We've been together for a little over a year now, but sometimes it feels like I've known her forever. Other times, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning. It was a Saturday night, and I was at this house party. Now, I'm not usually a party guy. I'm more of a Netflix and chill kind of dude, you know? But my buddy Tom had been nagging me for weeks to get out there and live a little. So there I was, nursing a lukewarm beer, feeling like a fish out of water. The music was thumping, people were dancing and laughing, and I was seriously considering making an Irish exit. That's when I saw her. Katrin walked in like she owned the place. She had on these killer heels that made her legs look a mile long, and this little black dress that hugged every curve. Her blonde hair was down, cascading over her shoulders like a golden waterfall. But it was her eyes that got me. They were this intense blue, and when she looked at me, I swear time stood still. She zeroed in on me like a heat-seeking missile. Before I knew what was happening, she was right in front of me, flashing this mischievous grin. "You look bored," she shouted over the music. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. Just not much of a party guy. She laughed, and it was like music. "Well, we can't have that. Come on, let's dance." Next thing I knew, she had grabbed my hand and was pulling me onto the makeshift dance floor. Now, I've got to be honest. I'm not exactly Fred Astaire, but with Katrin, it didn't matter. She moved like water, all fluid and graceful, and somehow made me look good too. We danced for what felt like hours. Every time I thought about taking a break, she'd pull me close or give me this look that made my heart race, and I'd forget all about being tired. As the night went on, we got closer and closer. Her hands were on my chest, my arms were around her waist, and the chemistry between us was off the charts. When the party started to wind down, I offered to walk her home. It wasn't exactly chivalry. I just didn't want the night to end. We stumbled through the streets, laughing and talking about everything and nothing. She lived in this tiny studio apartment a few blocks away. "Want to come up for a nightcap?" she asked when we reached her building, biting her lip in a way that made my knees weak. I didn't even hesitate. Absolutely. As soon as her door closed behind us, she was on me. Her lips crashed into mine, her hands tangled in my hair. It was like a dam had broken. All the tension, all the chemistry from the night exploded. Clothes came off in a frenzy, and before I knew it, we were tumbling onto her bed. The sex was intense, wild, passionate. Katrin was insatiable. Just when I thought we were done, she'd do something that would get me going again. We didn't get much sleep that night, but man, I didn't care. The next morning, I woke up feeling a mix of exhausted and exhilarated. Katrin was still asleep, her blonde hair splayed across the pillow. In the light of day, I worried that maybe this was just a one-night stand. But when she woke up and saw me, she smiled and pulled me in for another kiss. "So," she said, tracing patterns on my chest, "want to do this again sometime?" I grinned. "How about tonight?" And that's how it started. We fell into this pattern of seeing each other every day, usually ending up back at her place or mine. It was exciting, intoxicating. Katrin was like a drug, and I was happily addicted. After a couple of weeks of this, we decided to make it official. Why not, right? We were already spending all our free time together. It just made sense. Looking back, I guess things moved pretty fast. But when you're in the middle of it, when you're riding that high of a new relationship, you don't really stop to think about it. You just go with the flow. Before I knew it, we were talking about moving in together. It had only been a couple of months, but we were spending every night together anyway. Plus, rent in the city was killer, and splitting it would save us both some cash. So, just like that, Katrin moved into my place. It was a small one-bedroom apartment, nothing fancy, but it was ours. We spent that first weekend arranging her stuff, arguing over where to put things, and christening every surface of our now shared home. Living with Katrin was an experience. Remember how I said she was insatiable? Yeah, that wasn't just a first-night thing. This girl had a sex drive that put rabbits to shame. Don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. What guy wouldn't want a gorgeous girlfriend who couldn't keep her hands off him? So let me tell you more about Katrin's appetite. Man, that girl was something else. I mean, I'm a healthy 24-year-old guy, I work out, I'm in pretty good shape. But Katrin? She was on another level entirely. We're talking twice a day minimum, sometimes more. And it wasn't just about the frequency. It was the intensity, the creativity, the sheer enthusiasm she brought to every encounter. It was like she was on a mission to christen every square inch of our apartment. Take our kitchen, for instance. One Sunday morning, I'm standing there in my boxers, flipping pancakes. Just a normal, lazy weekend, right? Next thing I know, Katrin walks in wearing nothing but one of my t-shirts. Before I can even say good morning, she's got me pinned against the counter, kissing me like her life depended on it. Needless to say, we didn't eat breakfast that morning, or lunch. We barely made it to dinner. And let's just say I'll never look at our kitchen counter the same way again. Then there was the time with the washing machine. You know how in movies they always make it look so sexy and fun? Let me tell you, it's not. It's awkward and cramped, and that spin cycle is way more intense than you'd think. But Katrin? She was determined to try it. So there we were, trying to find a position that didn't result in bruised elbows or bumped heads, all while the machine's doing its best to throw us off. Not exactly my finest moment, but Katrin thought it was hilarious. And don't even get me started on the shower. Now, shower sex sounds great in theory, right? Hot water, soap suds, close quarters. But in reality, it's slippery. Someone's always cold because they're not under the water, and there's a constant fear of falling and cracking your head open. But did that stop Katrin? Hell no. She was like a woman possessed, determined to make it work. And I've got to hand it to her. After a few, let's call them practice runs, we got pretty good at it. But it wasn't just about trying new locations. Katrin was always looking to spice things up, to try new things. She'd come home with new lingerie, or suggest we try out some new position she'd read about in Cosmo or something. There was this one time she blindfolded me as soon as I got home from work. Didn't say a word, just led me to the bedroom and spent the next hour teasing me with different sensations. Ice cubes, feathers, her breath on my skin. By the time she was done, I was practically begging. It was intense, man. I felt like I was going to explode. And don't even get me started on her dirty talk. Christ, the things that would come out of her mouth. I'm not a prude, but some of the stuff she'd say would make me blush. She had this way of describing exactly what she wanted to do to me, or what she wanted me to do to her, that would get me going from 0 to 60 in no time flat. I remember this one time, we were at a friend's wedding. During the reception, Katrin kept leaning over and whispering the most filthy things in my ear. By the time we got to the hotel, we barely made it through the door before clothes started flying. I'm pretty sure we scandalized the couple in the next room. Or there was the time we almost got caught in a changing room at the mall. Katrin was trying on some new clothes, and she called me in to help her with the zipper. Next thing I know, we're trying to keep quiet while hooking up in this tiny cubicle. An employee almost walked in on us. Talk about a close call. But it wasn't always just spontaneous, wild stuff. Katrin could be incredibly romantic when she wanted to be. Like the time she surprised me on my birthday. I came home from work to find her waiting for me, wearing nothing but a bow. She had candles lit all around the apartment, and she'd prepared a whole night of pampering for me. Massage, bubble bath, the works. It was one of the best nights of my life. And let me tell you, Katrin was creative. She'd come up with these elaborate scenarios like role-play stuff. One time she dressed up as a sexy librarian, complete with glasses and a pencil in her hair, and punished me for having an overdue book. Another time she pretended to be a stranded motorist and I was the mechanic who came to fix her engine. Cheesy? Maybe. Hot as hell? Absolutely. But here's the thing. As amazing as all this was, sometimes it was a lot. Don't get me wrong, I loved it. What guy wouldn't? But there were times when I'd come home from a long day at work, and all I wanted was to crash on the couch and watch some TV. But Katrin would have other ideas. And it's not like I could just say no, you know? I mean, have you ever tried turning down a gorgeous woman who's practically throwing herself at you? It's not easy. And sometimes I worried that maybe we were using sex as a crutch. Like, instead of talking about our problems or dealing with issues in our relationship, we'd just hop into bed. It was easier, you know? Why have a difficult conversation when you could just have mind-blowing sex instead? But at the time, I didn't think too much about it. I was young, I was in love, and I had this incredible, sexy woman who couldn't keep her hands off me. Life was good, you know? There was this one night, though, that sticks out in my memory. We'd had a bit of an argument earlier in the day. I can't even remember what it was about now. Something stupid, probably. Anyway, we'd gone to bed angry, backs turned to each other. But in the middle of the night, I felt Katrin's hand on my shoulder. She didn't say anything, just pulled me towards her. We made love that night, slow and tender, totally different from our usual wild encounters. And afterwards, as we lay there in the dark, I felt closer to her than ever before. That's the thing about Katrin. Just when I thought I had her figured out, she'd surprise me. She wasn't just this sex-crazed party girl. She had depths to her that I was only beginning to explore. But man, the sex was still out of this world. I remember this one time we were having a lazy Sunday morning in bed. Katrin had this thing about morning sex. She said it was the best way to start the day. So there we were, tangled up in the sheets, when suddenly she gets this mischievous look in her eye. Next thing I know, she's straddling me, riding me like her life depended on it. The bed was creaking so loud I was sure the neighbors could hear, but in that moment, I couldn't have cared less. Looking back, I wonder if maybe we relied too much on the physical side of our relationship, if maybe we used sex as a way to avoid dealing with other issues. But at the time, I was too caught up in the moment to see it. All I knew was that I had this amazing, beautiful woman who couldn't keep her hands off me, who made me feel desired and wanted in a way I never had before, who could turn a mundane Tuesday night into an adventure with just a look. I thought I was the luckiest guy in the world. I thought what we had was special, unbreakable. I mean, how could it not be, right? We had this incredible connection, this intense passion. Sure, maybe we didn't always communicate the best, but the physical side of our relationship was off the charts. That had to count for something, right? I had a beautiful girlfriend who I was crazy about, a decent job, and a sex life that most guys would kill for. What more could a guy want? So life was pretty sweet for a while. Katrin and I were in our own little world, and man, was it a fun world to be in. But you know how they say all good things must come to an end? Well, I wouldn't say things ended exactly, but they definitely changed. It started when I got promoted at work. I was a waiter at this upscale restaurant downtown, nothing too fancy, but the tips were good. One day, the manager called me into his office. I thought I was in trouble. Maybe a customer had complained or something. Instead, he offered me a position as assistant manager. Now, this was a big deal. More responsibility, better pay, a chance to move up in the restaurant world. But it also meant longer hours, more stress, and a whole lot less free time. I was ecstatic when I got home that night. I burst through the door, ready to share the good news with Katrin. "Babe, you won't believe what happened!" I shouted as I walked in. Katrin was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She looked up, a bit startled by my enthusiasm. "What's up?" I told her about the promotion, practically bouncing on my toes with excitement. But Katrin's reaction wasn't quite what I expected. She smiled and congratulated me, but I could see something in her eyes. Disappointment? Worry? I couldn't quite place it. "That's great, babe," she said, but her voice lacked its usual enthusiasm. "Does this mean you'll be working more?" I nodded, trying to keep my excitement up despite her lukewarm response. "Yeah, but think about it. We'll have more money. We could start saving for a house, maybe take that vacation we've been talking about." She forced a smile. "Yeah, I guess you're right." I should have seen it then, the warning signs. But I was too caught up in my own world, too focused on the future I thought we were building together. The first few weeks of my new position were brutal. I was working 12-hour days, sometimes more. I'd come home exhausted, barely able to keep my eyes open long enough to eat dinner. Katrin tried to be understanding at first. She'd have dinner waiting when I got home, or she'd give me massages to help me relax. But as the weeks turned into months, things started to change. The frequency of our intimate moments decreased drastically. Instead of multiple times a day, we were down to maybe once or twice a week. And even then, it felt different, less passionate. more routine. I tried to make up for it in other ways. I'd use my new salary to buy Katrin gifts. Jewelry, clothes, that fancy perfume she'd been eyeing. I'd surprise her with flowers or chocolates. I even managed to swing a weekend getaway to a nearby beach resort. And for a while, it seemed to work. Katrin would light up when I'd come home with a surprise for her. She'd shower me with affection, and for a few hours it would feel like old times. But then morning would come. I'd have to go back to work, and the cycle would start all over again. I remember this one night. I'd had a particularly rough day at work. There had been a mix-up with a big reservation, and I'd spent most of the evening dealing with angry customers and stressed-out staff. By the time I got home, it was past midnight. I was exhausted, frustrated, and just wanted to crash. But when I walked in, Katrin was waiting for me. She was wearing this little black negligee that I'd bought her the week before. She had candles lit, soft music playing. She'd clearly put a lot of effort into setting the mood. "Hey, baby," she purred, sauntering over to me. "Rough day?" I nodded, already feeling guilty about what I knew was coming. "Yeah, it was pretty crazy." She pressed herself against me, her hands sliding under my shirt. "Well, why don't you let me help you relax?" And God, I wanted to. Katrin looked amazing, and any other time I would have been all over her. But I was just so damn tired. I gently pushed her hands away. "I'm sorry, babe, I'm really beat. Can we maybe do this tomorrow?" The look on her face. Man, it was like I'd slapped her. She stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. "Oh, yeah, sure. No problem." I felt like shit. I tried to apologize, to explain, but Katrin just waved me off. "It's fine, Mike, I get it. You're tired. Go to bed." That night, as I lay in bed, Katrin's back turned to me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted between us, but I told myself it was just a rough patch. Every couple goes through them, right? The next day, I went all out. I called in sick to work, something I never did, and spent the whole day pampering Katrin. I made her favorite breakfast, took her shopping, then out to a fancy dinner. I pulled out all the stops in bed that night, determined to make up for the previous evening. And for a while it seemed to work. Katrin was all smiles and kisses, telling me how much she loved me, how happy she was. But looking back, I wonder if maybe it was too little, too late. As the weeks went on, I noticed more changes in Katrin. She started going out more, often not coming home until the early hours of the morning. When I'd ask where she'd been, she'd just shrug and say, "Out with friends." I tried not to let it bother me. I told myself she was just blowing off steam, that she needed her own outlet since I was so busy with work. But there was a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach that I couldn't shake. One day I came home early from work, hoping to surprise Katrin. Maybe we could have a nice dinner together, reconnect a bit. But when I walked in, the apartment was empty. There was a note on the fridge. "Gone out, don't wait up." I sighed, feeling defeated. As I was about to head to the bedroom to change, something caught my eye. A small box, partially hidden under the couch. Curious, I picked it up. It was a vibrator, brand new, still in its packaging. My mind started racing. When did she buy this? Why didn't she tell me about it? Was I not satisfying her anymore? I put the box back where I found it, trying to push the thoughts out of my mind. But the seed of doubt had been planted. That night, when Katrin came home, I casually asked her if there was anything she wanted to talk about, anything she needed from me. She looked at me strangely, then shook her head. "I'm fine, Mike," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Everything's fine." But I knew deep down that everything was not fine. Something had changed. Something was off. And for the first time since we'd gotten together, I found myself wondering if maybe, just maybe, Katrin wasn't being entirely honest with me. I tried to shake it off, to focus on work and on making things better with Katrin. I'd leave little notes for her around the apartment, telling her how much I loved her. I'd send her text messages during the day, just to let her know I was thinking about her. I even started looking into couples therapy, thinking maybe we just needed some help communicating. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, that somewhere along the line, while I was busy working and planning for our future, Katrin had started to slip away. And the worst part? I had no idea how to get her back. So, life got complicated. My new job as assistant manager was demanding as hell. I was working crazy hours, often coming home well after midnight. Katrin's schedule at the flower shop was pretty much the opposite. She'd be up and out before I even rolled out of bed most days. We were like ships passing in the night, you know? I remember this one week where we literally didn't see each other awake for 5 days straight. I'd get home, she'd be asleep, she'd wake up, I'd be passed out. We were living together, but it felt like we were worlds apart. The intimacy? Man, it took a nosedive. We went from our wild, can't keep our hands off each other phase to, well, barely anything. Maybe 2 or 3 times a week, if we were lucky. And even then, it felt different. Less passionate, more like going through the motions. I tried to talk to Katrin about it. One rare evening when we were both home and awake, I brought it up. "Hey babe," I said, trying to keep my tone casual. "I feel like we haven't been connecting much lately. Is everything okay?" Katrin shrugged, not looking up from her phone. "We're both busy, Mike. It's fine." But it wasn't fine. I could feel her slipping away, and I was desperate to hold on. I started trying to plan date nights, but something always seemed to come up. Either I'd get called into work for an emergency, or Katrin would suddenly remember plans with her friends. I remember this one time, I had managed to get a whole Saturday off. I was so excited. I had it all planned out. Breakfast in bed, a walk in the park, dinner at this fancy new restaurant downtown. But when I woke up that morning, all pumped for our day together, Katrin was already gone. There was a note on the fridge, covering a shift for Sarah. Don't wait up. I was crushed. I ended up spending the day alone, watching TV and feeling sorry for myself. When Katrin got home that night, I tried to hide my disappointment, but she must have sensed something was off. "What's wrong?" she asked, her tone more irritated than concerned. "Nothing," I said, not wanting to start an argument. "Just missed you today." She rolled her eyes. "Come on, Mike. We're adults. We don't need to spend every second together." That stung. I wanted to argue, to tell her that it wasn't about spending every second together. It was about feeling like we were drifting apart. But I didn't. I just nodded and went to bed. As the weeks went by, I noticed more changes in Katrin. She started going out more, often not coming home until the early hours of the morning. When I'd ask where she'd been, she'd just shrug and say, "Out with friends." I tried not to let it bother me. I told myself she was just blowing off steam, that she needed her own outlet since I was so busy with work. But there was a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach that I couldn't shake. One day, I came home early from work, hoping to surprise Katrin. Maybe we could have a nice dinner together, reconnect a bit. But when I walked in, the apartment was empty. There was a note on the fridge. "Gone out. Don't wait up." I sighed, feeling defeated. As I was about to head to the bedroom to change, something caught my eye. A small box partially hidden under the couch. Curious, I picked it up. It was a vibrator, brand new, still in its packaging. My mind started racing. When did she buy this? Why didn't she tell me about it? Was I not satisfying her anymore? I put the box back where I found it, trying to push the thoughts out of my mind. But the seed of doubt had been planted. That night, when Katrin came home, I casually asked her if there was anything she wanted to talk about, anything she needed from me. She looked at me strangely, then shook her head. "I'm fine, Mike," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Everything's fine." But I knew deep down that everything was not fine. Something had changed, something was off, and for the first time since we'd gotten together, I found myself wondering if maybe, just maybe, Katrin wasn't being entirely honest with me. The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went out and bought Katrin a vibrator. A nice one, too, not some cheap piece of plastic. I figured if she was going to use one, it might as well be a good one, right? When I gave it to her, Katrin looked surprised, maybe a little embarrassed. "What's this for?" she asked, turning the box over in her hands. I shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Just thought, since I'm not around as much, you might want some company." She laughed, but it sounded forced. Thanks, I guess. I wanted to ask her about the other one, the one I'd found under the couch, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt like admitting defeat somehow. After that, things got even weirder between us. Katrin started spending more and more time in the bathroom, always with her phone. She'd come out looking flushed, avoiding eye contact. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that she was just using her new toy. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. I started noticing other things too, like how Katrin would always turn her phone face down when I was around, or how she'd get these text messages late at night and rush to reply, angling the screen away from me. One night, I woke up to find Katrin's side of the bed empty. I could hear her voice coming from the living room, talking in hushed tones. When I got up to check on her, I heard her quickly end the call and pretend to be scrolling through social media. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep the suspicion out of my voice. "Yeah, just couldn't sleep," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Go back to bed. I'll be there in a minute." I wanted to push, to demand answers, but I was scared of what I might find out if I dug too deep. So I did what any coward would do. I buried my head in the sand. I threw myself into work even more, telling myself that if I could just get that promotion, if I could just provide a better life for us, everything would be okay. But deep down, I knew. I knew that something had changed, that the Katrin I fell in love with was slipping away, and I had no idea how to get her back. It all came to a head one Saturday night. I had managed to get off work early, and I was excited to spend some time with Katrin. But when I got home, she was all dressed up, clearly heading out. "Where are you going?" I asked, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. "Oh, just out with the girls," she said, brushing past me to grab her purse. "Don't wait up." As she reached for the door, I couldn't take it anymore. "Katrin, wait! Can we talk?" She turned, an impatient look on her face. "About what?" "About us," I said, my voice cracking a little. "About what's happening to us." For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt? Regret? But then it was gone, replaced by a cold indifference that scared the hell out of me. "There's nothing to talk about, Mike," she said, her voice flat. "Everything's fine." And with that, she was gone, leaving me alone in an apartment that suddenly felt way too big and way too empty. I spent that night tossing and turning, my mind racing with all the possibilities of what might be going on. Was Katrin cheating on me? Was she just growing apart from me? Had I somehow screwed everything up without even realizing it? By the time morning came, I was a wreck, and I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that things were about to change. I just had no idea how much. One day, a mutual friend of ours, Jessica, called me out of the blue. Jessica worked in promotions, and she casually mentioned that Katrin had bought 3 tickets to a party she was hosting. I was surprised because first, Katrin hadn't mentioned any party to me, and second, she bought 3 tickets. The party was on a Saturday when I was scheduled to work until at least 4 a.m., meaning I wouldn't be home until around 6 a.m. Jessica was curious if I was attending, but I told her Katrin must have gotten tickets for her friends and I knew about it. Of course, I lied. Something was definitely off, and I had to find out what. I decided to switch shifts and give my earnings to a colleague so I could attend that party. I dressed in clothes I wouldn't normally wear, hoping to blend in and not be recognized immediately. I wanted to catch Katrin in whatever she was up to without her spotting me first. I waited until the party was already in full swing before I made my entrance. I had to buy a ticket through Jessica to ensure neither Katrin nor any of our mutual friends would know I was there. The party was your typical wild scene. Loud music, people dancing and drinking, the whole works. As soon as I walked in, I spotted Katrin in a stunning red dress. She looked gorgeous, and for a split second I almost felt guilty for being suspicious. But then, she disappeared into the crowd. I headed to the bar and asked the bartender if he'd seen a spectacular blonde in a red dress. I mentioned that she looked really hot, hoping to sound like any other partygoer trying to score. The bartender chuckled and said, "Mate, you won't be the first tonight. Get in line. This is the fourth time this evening she's been alone with someone in the men's room. My stomach dropped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Without thinking, I rushed towards the restrooms. I found a closed stall and, ignoring the pounding in my chest, forced the door open. Inside, I saw Katrin and a guy in a compromising position. She was, well, busy with her mouth. The guy yelped in pain as Katrin, startled, bit down on him in shock. I slammed the broken door in anger and stormed out, leaving Katrin scrambling to cover herself and follow me. I didn't wait for her. I was furious and heartbroken. By the time I got home, I had already made up my mind. I gathered all her belongings and threw them out the door. Katrin arrived shortly after, her face a mix of shame and panic. "Mike, please, let's talk," she pleaded, but I couldn't even look at her. "Talk about what, Katrin? How you've been screwing around behind my back while I've been working my ass off to provide for us? You're a bitch, Katrin, double bitch. Get out!" I yelled. She tried to argue, to explain, but I was done. I couldn't listen to her lies anymore. I shoved her out the door and slammed it shut, locking it behind her. For a while I stood there, breathing heavily, trying to calm down. The anger and betrayal were overwhelming. As the days passed, I tried to piece my life back together. I cut off all contact with Katrin, blocked her number, and avoided any places we used to go together. My friends were supportive, though they were shocked by how everything had unfolded. They told me I'd dodged a bullet, that Katrin wasn't worth my time. Deep down, I knew they were right, but it didn't make the pain any less. One night, Tom, the same friend who had dragged me to that fateful party, invited me out for drinks. I was hesitant at first, but he insisted it would do me good to get out and have some fun. So I agreed. We ended up at a local bar, one that had a laid-back vibe and wasn't too crowded. As we sat there, nursing our beers, Tom leaned in and said, "Mike, you know you're better off without her, right? I mean, she clearly didn't respect you or your relationship." I nodded, staring at the bubbles in my drink. "Yeah, I know. It just sucks, you know? I really thought she was the one." Tom clapped me on the shoulder. "Hey, you'll find someone better. Someone who appreciates you for who you are." So it is, I thought. Life goes on.